But one of the things that they talk about is sort of, consumer level of confidence in different agencies' ability to accurately, or rather, to do that assessment of risk-benefit in a way that safeguards the public. And the level for FDA was only 60%, which is not terribly inspiring. For EPA, it was 59%, for USDA, 58%. And for businesses to make that call is 47%. So you can see that at least, according to this poll in the public's mind, FDA is held only a slightly higher regard with respect to its ability to protect public health as would be private industry. So coming to a conclusion, I would, from my perspective, with red nanotech, I think that nobody has really serious questions about the ability of FDA to ferret out safety issues and to address those safety issues before those products come to market. It's pretty clear that if the products get to market and they get through that approval process, it's because a decision was made that the risks, the benefits outweigh the risks. So the benefits side of the equation is likely to be addressed pre-market. And then the issue of consumer choice really is off the table because people who are going to take advantage of these therapies are going to take advantage of them because they have a need for them. So it's not the same kind of issue that you see with green nanotech products where people aren't sure what they're getting because it's not on the label. The last bullet is really the key piece. Is there going to be effective, transparent, predictable regulation of nanotechnology? And the effective part is the part that really needs some work and some boning up. The funding has increased in recent years, but it's not clear that it's enough. And just yesterday, I think, and I think FDA recognizes this, that they have some capacity building to do. NIH and FDA yesterday had a press briefing where they announced this collaboration toward further development of what they're calling regulatory science. So everything you all have been talking about is a translational science. And what FDA is concerned about is the regulatory science. And the way that the commissioner of FDA put it is, it's like you're in a rowboat and you have this arm pulling on the translational science, you have this arm pulling on the regulatory science, and her analogy was, this arm has become so atrophied, so weak, was that essentially you could end up rowing around in circles. If you want products to actually get to market, you need that regulatory science to be sufficiently robust and well-developed that it can get you there. And I'll close with what I think is just a little inside joke between us. This little publication recently, the quotation there is second bullet. Most researchers do not use suitable personal laboratory protection equipment when handling nanomaterials that could become airborne. And then the second quote, one of the most surprising results is that nearly 3/4 of respondents reported not having internal rules to follow regarding the handling of nanomaterials. So, you all know what goes on in your research labs better than I do, but I think it would be the ultimate irony if the first documented case of a nanomaterial-induced illness were to come out of a research lab. So that's all I have for now. I'm happy to take questions. I think it would be especially interesting if for some of the questions, because I know a number of you have already had a lot of experience with FDA and the product categories that you deal with. That I'd be happy for any one of you to chip in as we talk about any questions that might come up.
Questions?
Tad Hogue, IMM. So I'm wondering, as the FDA is looking at this nanotechnology regulation, does it influence or is it led by the similar discussions in other countries?
I think more and more there is an effort to try to harmonize whenever possible. One of the things that's been interesting is to see that divide in the biotechnology context, and that's, I think, where we first started hearing the term the precautionary principle coming up. So there's this sense that here we're really focused on the science, and they're focused on the science, and I think everybody's trying to harmonize on the science. But then what gets difficult is for the questions that fall outside of the scientific realm. Okay, so we have this technology, it's safe, it's effective, do we really want to use it, or how are we going to make it available? How the U.S. and how the EU handled those questions, I think, is yet to be determined. We still see a lot of disparity in the biotech arena. You know, I mentioned just the example of RBST approved in the U.S., not approved in Canada. I think it's also not approved in the EU. So there's a report that came out, a roadmap for nanomedicine that was put together by a consortium of, it was really led by private industry-led effort. But they teamed up with the European Commission to develop this roadmap for nanomedicine, and it's available online. I can send you the link for that if you want as well. But that's interesting because our approach here, you know, NIH has its nanomedicine roadmap, and what they've chosen to do is to, you know, establish these 8 centers for to fund basic research on nanotechnology, and they've split out these different phases. But it looks like what's happening in the EU, and the latest document that comes out of this EU program is pretty frank. There's a quotation in there, I don't want to misquote it, but it's something along the lines of, you know, it's clear that an academic or a laissez-faire approach to research in the nanomedicine area just is not going to be effective. And so they've really tried to hone in on 3 topical areas to guide their research. Part of it, you know, is in recognition of the fact that the economy gets tight. There's less money to go around, and so if you're going to draw investment, if you're going to put it on a lot of money, you really want it to yield results in the relatively near term in a category of products that is useful and beneficial. So there are, you know, a lot of factors at play that would seem to go beyond the science.
Question.
Kester, Penn State College of Medicine, and I'll put on my Keystone Nano hat here. Because surprisingly, the same technology we're using for cancer, the nano jackets, has an industrial use. And in fact, we have a contract with a major chemical manufacturer. And surprisingly, I've spent a lot of time in the last couple of months with the EPA and OSHA, et cetera. And just comparing the regulatory hurdles and procedures we have to go through between the two is mind-boggling, but there are a lot of animals right now who are getting calcium phosphate nanotechnology sprayed up their nose because you might have to make up tons of this stuff, and what does it mean when they have nano around the air?
Right.
So the question is, or the comment is, it seems like information is going to be coming through the EPA, OSHA, FDA around how we evaluate nanotechnology as more and more nano products come to the market. And it seems to me that EPA does not talk to the FDA, does not talk to OSHA, does not talk to... And it seems like information from each of those agencies should be passed along to each other, because what I'm concerned is that something in the industrial space may make a red flag and then stop development of FDA-backed products in the nano space, and or vice versa. And it seems like there's very little discussion between these organizations as they evaluate differently nano. So, comments?
Yeah, no, that's my perspective as well. You know, looking back on the history of the development of biotech, it seems to me that it was fairly gradual, where, you know, there was a lot of discussion early on about the risks, and there were a lot of very strong containment measures that were imposed on all the different labs that were engaging in the research. And then slowly, as people gained comfort, they started to liberalize those. And then on a federal government level, the Office of Science and Technology Policy in the White House really took on the role of pulling together all those different agencies and developing a comprehensive policy. And so you see those Federal Register notices, you go back into the 80s and the 90s, and you see those Federal Register notices where the first Federal Register notice is the Office of Science and Technology Policy. Here's our framework, you know, here's how we're going to make sure that there's coordination across all the agencies. And then you had each agency follow along with its own Federal Register notice, so you ended up with something that was about that thick. But at least you had the sense that there was an overarching, comprehensive effort to coordinate at the federal level. And one of the criticisms being levied now, and I think fairly, is that we've yet to see that with nanotechnology. So I think it's bad enough, you know, that information doesn't get shared the way it should within FDA components. I mean, sometimes you have to make a really strong effort to make sure that CEDAR and CBER and, you know, whatever components you deal with are actually talking to one another. I can, you know, sympathize with the challenge that you face in trying to get some kind of exchange of information communication between agencies.
In fact, I just